Hello and welcome to this episode of Aquinos Access. I'm your host, Eric Levenhagen, joined today by Eric Levenhagen. Eric is the principal and founder of ProWise Financial Consulting. And y'all, this is a really great episode we got lined up. This is episode 4 of 5, where we're deep diving into the world of profit first and financial harmony. And in this episode, we are laser focused on the role of profit first and the financial harmony framework for mature practices that are approaching transition. So let's go ahead and jump into it. Eric, thank you so much for joining us here in this episode of Access.
Always great to be here, Eric. Thanks for having me.
So look, let's go ahead and maybe kick this off. Why don't we kick this off by you maybe just providing a little recap and overview of the profit first methodology and the financial harmony?
Sure. Yeah. So just as a reminder, like profit first is a component of our financial harmony framework, right? So the profit first itself is really a cash flow management tool that is used by thousands of businesses across the world. And I always, if somebody's never heard of it before, I always liken it back to the old, your grandma's envelope system of managing cash in your household. And but it's that, but it uses bank accounts instead of envelopes. And really, there's a mechanical aspect to it, but really the power in it comes from the clarity that it gives you on where your cash position is sitting at basically any point in time, right? So that's the main benefit of it. Having clarity on the cash flow is a component of the overall financial harmony framework, which is simply, there's 3 main pillars to it. Personal prosperity. We gotta be aligned personally with what we're achieving, what we're going after, and make sure that all the work that we're putting in now is going to get us where we want to go. Financial clarity, which is all about the business model, the cash flow management, and really the performance of the business. Making sure that's contributing to that prosperity plan the way you want it to. And then work-life harmony, right? We got to like what we're doing and how we're doing it and how we're living our life. And there's a relationship there that we all have with work that, we don't want to go through all these years of hard work just to give up the most important things in our life, right? So there's got to be a fit there. So that's the framework. There's several components to it, but that's what we talk about day in and day out around here.
Absolutely. So profit first, right? Profit first. What is it? It's all about cash flow management. And I love how you make that analogy to the envelope system, or I know in my household growing up, it was like a jar system. You had your different jars for what you were saving to go towards. But when we kind of take it and look at it through the lens of a business, we realize that there are some critically important cash buckets that we need to have available, right? So profit first, digging into that cash flow management, and then it's profit first, utilizing profit first in the context of this broader financial harmony framework, which I know would you and the team at ProWise Financial, it's what you guys are laser focused in, right? Is the financial harmony framework and optimizing the personal, the financial, and the work-life balance elements of your situation as a business owner in growing the business and also accumulating wealth. So, I know in the last few episodes, Eric, we were kind of looking at profit first and the financial harmony framework. A few episodes back, we're looking at it through the lens of the cold start, or that practice that's in the early years. And we had that last episode that was all about practices in the peak earnings years, right? Maximizing the potential of profit first and their financial harmony framework. So let's now jump in and apply this to that mature practice that's approaching transition. Whether that transition is merely taking on a partner in the business, or if the transition is for the legacy doctor to be selling the entire business to the next generation. Let's go ahead and start to unpack some of these key areas of consideration as doctors are eyeing partnership or transition of their business.
Yeah, for sure. I think, for anybody in transition, I know if you've seen the prior episodes, we talk about this a lot, but we go back to this concept within personal prosperity element of financial harmony. and this life goal map, and updating it or reviewing it, and just making sure first and foremost we have a clear vision of like what is next, right? Because before we get into the weeds, we got to determine like, where are we going? What is your vision for your life after this transition, whatever it is, right? So if we're talking about bringing on a partner, are we doing that to, is it a massive growth move? Are we like really looking to expand and create a dominating practice? Are we looking to split? Of course, things are going to expand a bit when you bring in somebody like that on, but I think being very clear with that, like, it's probably an overused analogy, but when you're bringing on a partner in business, it really is like a marriage, and you are going to be spending a ton of time with that person, right? And so, not only making sure that you two or gel with your new partners, but that you have that you're very clear on what, like I said, what you expect your life to look like. Because if your partner's sitting over there with one idea to work and grind and put in all these hours, and you're sitting back here with like now I can relax a little bit because I've got a dual threat happening here that we can go after it together. If there's if it's not synergistic, then you're going to set yourself up for a hard time, right? When you're trying to work together. So if we're talking about transitioning out of the practice, that's the same kind of concept, right? Like I always refer to that with my clients as what's next for you. Like and again, we're going back to what is vision for life after your practice, after you exit the practice. Are you looking, because, a lot of times when we talk about business sales, sometimes for me, like for a while, the first thing that always popped into my head was retirement. And maybe that's the case when you're transitioning out, but maybe you're just on to something next, right? Maybe you're looking for going into a consulting role. Maybe there's a different related business that in the eye care space that you're looking to start or join. There's all these things, right, that could be happening next. So we just want to like focus on that, because then we can start to craft the financial planning and the plan around hitting those goals, right?
Sure.
It's fairly simple. So hopefully that makes okay sense.
Absolutely. And I think it's really important to point out that it starts with the goal setting and thinking about what comes next, right? Mm-hmm. And that's a step that I think sometimes folks kind of miss, right? We're so looking at the here and now and not thinking, well, like exactly what are we doing all this for? What's down the line? Because it's only once we have identified what these goals are that we can then work backwards to actually create the plan. And whether that plan is, in the financial harmony framework, really leveraging and maximizing specifics of the profit first management system, what have you. But start with the goal setting piece. I think something else that you touched on that's really important, Eric, was you referred to partnership as being business marriage, mm-hmm. And it absolutely is business marriage. We were speaking prior to going live here and talking about business marriage. Katrina, we unfortunately have had, unfortunately or fortunately, right, have been pulled into situations where we've got unhappy business marriages. So we need to help facilitate the divorce, if you will, sure. Which in many instances, and actually perhaps I should say it's good. It's work that needs to be done, right? Mm-hmm. Regardless of the circumstances that have brought a practice to this headway. But it all ties back to the goal setting piece, because I will say this also, Eric, in the instances, and I know that you guys have had clients that have had, the business divorces, if you will. But at the end of the day, I know what we've both observed is that the reason why we're in this situation is because there was a lack of planning earlier. There was a mm-hmm. lack of goal setting earlier. There was a lack of alignment earlier, years ago. That's kind of comes to this headway. So I really like how you've hit on, and really dare we say, the first key piece of really utilizing profit first and financial harmony and approaching transition is to think about what comes next and what are the goals in that context.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Okay, so let's now take it to the next step. So someone's identified what comes next. How do we work backwards and utilize the framework and the profit first cash management system to set ourselves up for success?
Sure. Yeah. So I think, really it's depending on which type of transition we're talking about, because they're going to have a bit different paths, right? And we're going to have obviously a different focus on things. If we're talking about bringing on a partner, we're going to go back to some of those steps that we talked about in the growth phase, the maturing phase, which is, very simply just making sure we have created, we're working, again, we continue working backwards to make sure we have that infrastructure and that, I guess it's that the infrastructure to create for sustainable growth. Because presumably for bringing on a partner, we're still kind of in a growth phase, just that things are going to be, again, entering this marriage. So I think the biggest thing is those communications, that alignment that we were talking about. And then making sure too that there's an element of tax planning and entity structuring that also comes in with alignment into your personal financial goals. And what I mean by that is, certain in the tax world and in the entity structuring world, like certain entity structures will not be suitable for some partners, let's call you, that are at different life stages or have very different personal goals. If you get somebody who wants to really try and maximize, just as an example, right? Somebody who really wants to maximize retirement savings and take advantage of other planning strategies at the entity level versus somebody who is at the stage where they're trying to pull out some more fruits of their labor and want to make more distributions. We got to make sure that that's planned for, because again, some entity structures like S corporations, for example, where they tie you into, kind of these pro rata distributions. So if you own 50-50 and you take $100, you got to give your partner $100. And so, sometimes those create challenges if they're not kind of thought about ahead of time. Right. So that's a big deal for what does the practice look like after this partner's getting added, and are we making sure that we're going to be able to do the things we want to do without either running into giving up tax benefits or running into cash flow issues for people, right? So we want to try and make everybody happy there. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. And it further builds on this theme of what comes next. What is the future? We need to have goals, right? We need to have goals that can be measured before we can take these steps back to create the plan. But a couple of things you touched on also, I think worth re-mentioning, Eric, is it all ties back to cash flow, particularly with, bringing on a partner. How is the business cash flowing? Is it cash flowing sufficiently to deliver the income so that people can realize their personal goals? And I think that's also really interesting that you brought up, right? I mean, typically when we're looking at partnership, we've got a legacy doctor who's been in ownership for 20, 25, 30 years. And then we've got, a legacy older doctor at a totally different phase of life. Right. And then we've got typically a younger doctor at a totally other phase of life, another stage. So as that plays into the personal goals, something else also you mentioned, the tax situation. Absolutely. I mean, someone in their 50s or 60s who's an empty nester is in a totally different tax situation from someone who's in their 30s with small children in school, or babies for that matter, right? So all of these things play a role. Again, the cash flow, how's the business cash flowing? How does that align with the personal goals? Tax planning, you also bring up entity structure and the degree to which different entity structures also are going to have different implications from a savings and investment standpoint, from a taxation standpoint. Really powerful stuff. Eric, I'm realizing on any one of these things, I think we can jump into some really deep dive stuff. But for those of you just joining us, just tuning in here, sitting down with Eric Levenhagen of ProWise Financial Consulting, we're unpacking the world of profit first and financial harmony as a practice approaches transition. And you shared some really great concepts here. Now let's maybe look at, in your experience in working with doctors who are making the partnerships happen or exiting and transitioning the business, what are some tips you've got for doctors that are looking at this in the next, I don't want to say the next year, because by the way, if you are looking to do this next year, should have started this process a few years prior.
Right.
Typically you're looking at this a few years down the line, right? But Eric, for doctors that are looking to make this happen, what kind of tips and best practices do you have for them?
I think you hit it right there. I mean, if I run into anything the most when we're getting into these conversations, I think is that obviously, unless you're a serial entrepreneur, which let's face it, like most people in professional services of any kind are not, right? Like, by and large, we got into it because we do the thing that the business does, right? So we're not necessarily like doing a startup, multiple startups through our lifetime, which means also we're typically not taking on multiple partners constantly over a lifetime, or selling more than one or two businesses a lot of us are going to sell one business in our life, right? And so is because of all that it's this whole process is very foreign to a lot of people because they don't have experience with it and they've never been through it. And so there's, a lot of times we get into like misconceptions of how long it's going to take, what are the right steps to take, how, if we're exiting, probably even either or, but definitely when we're exiting, the final exit of the business is, how do we maximize the value? And all these kind of conversations need to be happening as early as possible, as early as you, probably earlier than when you think, right? Like for people who are looking to exit their business, like we always love to have a little bit more than at least a 5-year runway, right? Because when buyers are looking to buy a business, it's typically a 3 to 5 year look back, but we want to get, if we can pick up that 5th year and just have that full look back for them, right? For a potential buyer, then we want to do that. Because the value of your practice, what are the major components of it? It's not going to be what you did last year, last 2 years. It's going to be an average of your sustainable performance, right? So if we're going to look to maximize value, we need to impact all those things. I think from my experience, like the most painful ones for me are somebody who has waited too long because they haven't, this all like is interconnected, right? Because if you go through these personal prosperity planning tools we have in the financial harmony framework, and we pay attention to your work-life harmony at the same time as we're focused on the financial performance, then we don't get to a spot where the really painful spot where we're on the brink of burnout. When we're just ready to like unload the thing, like I've got to this, I've got to such and such an age, I'm done working, I want to sell it. And we were almost like starting to fall out of love with the business at that point because it's just taken up so much time and energy, right? And what happens when you start to fall out of love with something? You may not take care of it as well as you did in the earlier years, right? And that's painful, right? Because if the performance, if you don't want to work as hard and you want to, if the performance is not there, if it's dwindling or declining, then that's going to have an impact on your sale, right? So we want to try and plan ahead for that and have those discussions well before you hit that wall, so to speak.
Yeah.
So I think that's really key, because then if we get the look back, we can also kind of determine, again, for somebody who's exiting, right, the kind of typical process we're going to go through is, again, going back to that what's next, and what do you need or hope to get from the practice? What do you hope to walk away with? because we can work backwards into like, is that a realistic picture? Because you're going to have, the valuation, you're going to have, maybe there's liabilities on the books. You're going to have taxes. We want to be talking about exit strategy for that. So there's, a number of moving components, and we want to make sure that we're painting a realistic picture that you can expect. Like, obviously we hope that you've had some, at this point, some supplemental savings that you can, if you're going into retirement or into something new, if your income is going to drop, there's some kind of supplemental savings or retirement savings, so that we don't, we don't need to rely on proceeds from the sale of the business in order to live our life afterwards, right? That's the ideal. But sometimes it doesn't happen. Sometimes that practice sale is supplementing a retirement plan. And so, but those are the types of things we need to know ahead of time to be able to say, like, okay, what are we going to do to enhance the value in these last 3 to 5 years, or even longer, but at least that amount of time, so that you're walking away and your life, you're walking away with what you want, and your life is going to be as you expect it to be afterward. Right.
Yeah.
So I don't think there's anything worse than working a whole career. And I mean, like in terms of business and financial, is like working a whole career and thinking you're going to ride off into the sunset, and you get to that horizon, if you will, and you find out you can't do it. You find out you got to work longer, or you got to go get another job, or you just can't do all the things that you thought you were going to. You wanted to travel more, you wanted a lake house, or you wanted this or that, and you can't do it. It's like those are the crushing stories for me, right? Because what the heck did we work all this time for if we're just gonna, have to downsize our entire lifestyle? We might as well just work for somebody else and saved money and been like everybody else. Why do we put ourselves through all that stress, right?
Yeah. Eric, you unpacked a lot of really, really powerful themes there that I think can be, really across the board from, for starters, the fact that until you're doing it, it's a foreign process, right? There are a lot of misconceptions out there. Absolutely. And I know you guys see them and get the calls. We see them and get the calls, right? But really tying it all together, I think the most important thing that you've touched on is you got to start early. You can't wait too long. You even mentioned, we kind of go, and we're not going to go into the weeds here, but even just looking at evaluation. Constructing evaluation on 3 to 5 years, financials and tax returns and such. So, understand that it's over that period that's going to be painting the picture of this business. So even that of thinking, you're going to somehow pull all the stops out and make a bunch of changes in your business in 1 year to impact the value. For starters, if you are at this stage of your career, chances are you're just starting to get tired. You're done. You're ready to go to the next phase of your life. Right. And if you have a life partner, your life partner is even more ready for you to go to the next phase of life, right?
Yeah, for sure.
But to think that you can let things kind of get away from you, and then in a 12-month period turn it around, it's unrealistic. And even so, even if you did deliver one good year, remember these valuations are paid based on 3 to 5 years, depending on who you're securing financing or who your buyer's going to secure financing from. Having 1 year of growth at the end, it's really not going to do a whole lot to the value of your business. So you got to look at this thing over time. A lot of really, really great stuff, Eric. So look, why don't we, before we wrap up this episode, and by the way, for those of you that have been following along, our 5th and final episode, Eric's going to just really kind of pull out all the stops and share some best practices, like what you can do when you find yourself in these different situations. But before we wrap up this episode, where we've been talking about profit first and financial harmony for doctors that are approaching exit of their business or adding a partner. Eric, what are just some, what's the nature of the work that you guys do at ProWise, and how can you guys help doctors that are in this phase?
Yeah, for sure. So, ProWise Financial is a business advisory CPA firm, and we live and breathe these elements of financial harmony with our clients every day. And so, the best way to get started with that, if you want to dive a little deeper, is we have a free assessment on our website, prowisefinancial.com. Go there, click the Get Started button. You can do a free self-assessment on what types of things that you'll be able to see what types of things you're doing well and kind of have under control, and what types of things you may need to put some attention to. And it's those exact things that we're going to be able to help with along the way. So
fantastic. So listeners, you can head on over to prowisefinancial.com. Be sure to take your assessment. It's quite fascinating. Also, I've had the opportunity to check some of these out. It's extremely informative, sets you up for success. Absolutely. And Eric, if folks want to reach out to you, they can email you directly.
Yeah, absolutely. I answer all my emails personally still. So go ahead and reach out. If I can just point you in the right direction with the resource, or if you just want to have a quick discussion about what your next best steps may be to get your financial harmony improved and under control, go ahead and reach out. I'd love to hear from you.
Absolutely. Eric at prowisefinancial.com. Eric Levenhagen, thank you so much for joining us on this really insightful episode of Acrinos Access as we explore the world of profit first, cash management, and the financial harmony framework. For our viewers out there, no matter where you are in your practice life cycle, starting out, maximizing those peak earnings years, or eyeing transition, head on over to acrinos.com. There's a ton of ways that we can help you end to end through this process, and through collaborative partnerships as we have with folks like Eric at ProWise Financial. It takes the team to get you to the finish line. So be sure to tune in on the next episode of Acrinos Access. We're going to welcome Eric back to wrap things up. Until next time.